Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Royal Ontario Museum. My name is Chen Shen, Co-Chief Curator, Art and Culture. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge that this museum sits on the ancestral lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, who are the original stewards of this land from the time memorial to today. This land has been a meeting place of diverse peoples for generations, and I am grateful to be here with you tonight, continuing the long tradition. Now, my dear friends, welcome to the talk. This place is a message. Echoes of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the art of Kei Ito. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our program partners, the Japan Foundation, for their support of this timely and important program. Before we begin, kindly ensure your device and phones are turned to silence. On August 6th and 9th, 2025 this year, the world marks the 80th anniversary of the only nuclear bombs ever to have been dropped on civilians in war. Today's talk highlights the works of interdisciplinary artist Kei Ito, whose works are fundamentally rooted in the trauma and legacy passed down from his late grandfather, a survivor of atomic bombings of Hiroshima and the loss of many other family members from the explosion and the subsequent radiation poisoning. His work meditates on the complexities of his identities and heritage, and seeks to visualize the invisible forces such as radiations, memory, and human morality. Kei Ito will speak about his work and career and how he approaches complex and difficult histories, and you will hear his illustrated talk that will be followed by an onstage conversations with our own curator, Ram Bishop White Committee Associate Curators of Japanese Art and Culture, Dr. Akiko Taksui. We will leave rooms at the end of the conversation for a few of your questions. So thank you again, and please join me in welcoming Kei Ito to stage.
Thank you so much. It's incredible to be here to commemorate such a special week that, as you were saying, the August 6th, which was yesterday, it was a day that means so much to me. And I'm thankful for you guys to be here and for me to be here to talk about this practice that a lot to do with my heritage as AFM survivors. And thank you for the museum, Akiko-san as a curator, and the Japan Foundation to make this talk possible. So I'm a visual artist based in Baltimore, Maryland, located in East Coast, the United States, which is an hour away from DC. Much of my work expressed the intergenerational trauma caused by nuclear weapon and examine what it means for me to be an American immigrant and a third-generation AFM victim survivor. I mainly work with a process called cameraless photography, a process in which, rather than using a camera to make an image, I employ experimental darkroom technique. Most often, that involves exposing light-sensitive paper directly to the sunlight to create my artwork. My practice often takes on a ritualistic, almost performative element, rooted in body's engagement and repetition. This approach allows me to create works that's visually abstract, yet carry deeper meaning through the intentional usage of the material and process, which I'll discuss more in the later slides. So beyond my use of the cameralist photography technique to create photographic prints, I merge photography and installation art, bringing together image, space, and the presence in unified experience. These spaces become temporal memorials, ephemeral yet full of meanings. Through light, material, and space, they invite reflection and remembrance. More than passive environments, they function as an active platform where audience can confront and engage with complex social issues, ranging from historical trauma to collective memory, to environment to political concerns, allowing for the deeper and embodied form of witnessing. In pursuit this way of working, I find myself constantly testing the limits of what photography can be. I push the medium so much to the point I sometimes create sculpture or installation that contains almost no traditional image or prints at all. Instead, these works aim to capture the idea and essence of photography, exploring how light, time, and memory can exist beyond the flat surface of a print. This expansive approach of photography has shaped my body of work that moves fluidly between image, object, and space. Today, I will be sharing a wide selection of the project that reflects this practice, including some of the most recent work created this year, which you see right now. But before diving into the detail of each project, I feel it's important to begin with the origin of my connection to nuclear trauma, my grandfather. My grandfather, Takeshi Ito, was a high school student when he witnessed the great tragedy that destroyed everything in Hiroshima. He survived the bombing, yet lost many of his family members from the explosion itself and radiation poisoning. And later in his life, he dedicated his life to the anti-nuclear activism, serving 2 decades as a chairperson of Hidankyo, a prominent organization of atomic bomb survivors that was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize this year. He continued to speak out against the use of the nuclear weapon throughout his life before ultimately passing from cancer when I was 9 years old. Many of my projects were inspired not only by my grandfather's story of irradiated trauma, but also by the experience of countless others around the world who have suffered from nuclear-related harm, including the group of American nuclear weapon victims known as downwinders, who were exposed to the radiation during the nuclear weapon testing in the United States. Along with the memory of my grandfather, global story of the nuclear trauma, and my own experience of navigating life in this uncertain, chaotic time, all serves as a source of inspiration to make my artwork. Now, turning to one of my first projects I created relating to the nuclear weapon, Sungazing Scroll, has since become a foundation piece that helped define my artistic practice. This photographic scroll, made once a year for the about past 10 years, is an ongoing annual edition, was also one of the first photographic projects I made without using a camera. As I mentioned earlier, my grandfather's passed from cancer when I was 9, and because of this, I actually don't remember too much of him telling me about his experience of Hiroshima. Rather, he was my grandfather. He didn't really talk about his experience at home. So I actually regret not asking any of the questions, but I was 9 years old. I was watching cartoon, I was reading comic books. But one thing I remember him telling me was like that day in Hiroshima was like hundreds of sun lighting up the sky. And this statement of hundreds of sun haunted my childhood and even until today. I struggled for a long time to try to find a way to express this haunting memory of hundreds of suns. At first, I tried using a camera, but soon I realized its limitation. If a camera is a tool that records something that's in front of you, then how do I capture something invisible, like radiation, trauma, memory, or liminal space between life or death? My answer was to abandon the camera altogether and return to the most fundamental and primitive element of the photography, light and shadow. This search for the way to connect my grandfather's word, the hundreds of suns in the sky, to my own practice ultimately led to create this sun-gazing scroll project, in which I expose chromogenic darkroom paper, aka color darkroom paper. If you go to a CVS, that's the kind of the paper they use. Timing each, exposing them to the rhythm of my breath, to the sunlight. Meaning, in the darkened space, I slowly pull the paper in front of the small aperture, just like a camera obscura, exposing to the sunlight as I inhale my breath, and pausing as I inhale my breath. Exposing it to the sunlight as I inhale, and pausing, I exhale my breath. Resulting, the image is shaped by both the strength of the sunlight and duration of my each breath. So what I meant is that the larger, more saturated area of the scroll reveal moment when I was exhaling my breath, thus allowing the light to accumulate on the print, while thinner line in between these black dots correspond to the motion I was pulling the paper, thus it's getting the less light, thus it's a longer elongated line. So it's essentially an embodiment of my each breath. I repeated this for 108 times, as this scroll is typically 100 to 200 feet long. And the 108 is a number that holds deep ritualistic significance in Japanese Buddhism and in my childhood memory. On New Year's Eve in Japan, a temple strikes bells 108 times to cleanse us of earthly desires and purifying our soul, as act often seen as a renewal, healing, or even the redemption. Over time, the number of the use of the 108 became my motif in art making, alongside of the use of the sunlight and breath. The entire process of creating these prints became a process of ritualistic image making, an act of remembrance and continuation. The mark left by an atomic blast on my grandfather's life, and even upon his breath, is carried forward into my own, materializing as the shadow traced you see in my project. While Sun-gazing Scroll was inspired by a deeply personal memory, much of my practice is equally driven by research. Understanding the historical, political, and cultural context of nuclear weapon across the world is essential to my work. Through research, I strive to move beyond my own family's story and create bridge between global community affected by the nuclear violence, connecting history, memory, and voices often separated by time, geography, and national boundaries. One of the community I mentioned earlier is American Downwinders. Individuals and family who were exposed to the radioactive fallout from nuclear weapon testing in the United States. As you can see here, between 1945 to 1992, the US government conducted 1,032 nuclear weapon testing on its own land, primarily in the desert of Nevada and other western states. So So this major push of the research on downwinders began at my residency at the University of Utah. There, I worked extensively in the university's library, Downwinders Archive, you see on the right, which houses one of the largest collections of historical material of downwinders, including archives, scientific data, and interviews. One of the projects that emerged from my research there is titled I Who Witnessed. This work is a collection of 108 C-prints photograph depicting human eyes. Half of it, 54 eyes, belongs to American downwinders. Other 54 eyes belong to Japanese atomic bomb survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The source images were gathered from a wide range of material, including books, video interviews, my own family album, and even the photograph I took during the personal encounter with nuclear weapon victims. I printed each eye on a transparency paper and exposed it to the sunlight for the duration of a single breath, echoing the ritualistic process used in the different projects. Once processed the prints were intentionally shuffled before installation, making it impossible to distinguish which eyes belongs to Japanese survivors and which one belongs to American downwinders. By doing so, the work emphasized the shared nature of nuclear trauma, revealing that the impact of nuclear weapons reaches beyond nationality, politics, or borders. This artwork showcases how I use archive material to create work that moves beyond my own story, connecting separated histories and communities through shared memories and collective witnessing. And the work I make constantly can evolve and change over time, even though it uses the same process or same project. This specific instant I wanted to express was when I had the residency at MASMOCA, which is in Massachusetts. This museum was once housed by Sprague Electronic, a company who designed and crafted a specialized capacitor, a device that triggered atomic bomb, including the one that tested in Trinity testing site and later dropped in Japan. After learning about this, I immediately got the permission to install I Who Witnessed in one of the unused buildings at MASMOCA. This new installation of the prints of these collective eye brought together a new layer of meanings, highlighting the impact of the space that is displayed can have on the project. But not only that, but this site also highlights that nuclear heritage does not have a singular origin, but rather is a vast web of network of components, all of which are impossible to separate or disconnect. Our connected story have shared parentage, and here I choose to commune and communicate with my own body and myself. And during my residency at MASMOCA, I become fascinated by the buildings itself, most of which have been preserved since the original condition of the days of Sprague Electronic. Knowing their history and role of developing the component of the first nuclear weapon, I felt compelled to use these bricks wall as a surface of my artwork. It was in this context that To Employ Your Light was born. For this project, I created 108 slides featuring the same eyes used in I Who Witnessed. Again, 54 eyes from downwinders, 54 eyes from Japanese hibakusha. Each slide was inserted into the modified camera flash, transforming flash into a projector that casts the image of the eye on the museum exterior wall. But unlike the conventional projector you see right now, which is showcasing the continuous image, the flash projection exists only for a split second, mirroring the brief, blinding light described by the survivor of the atomic bomb. But to document this process, which I consider a photographic performance, I synchronize the flash with the camera to record the fleeting projection as they appears on the building's surface. This was one of the rare occasions that I actually used the camera to record as a recording device. Not to create a static image, but to archive an ephemeral act, capturing the moment that otherwise would have been vanished in instant. So this 108 projections were ultimately recorded as photographs, creating the series that exists as documentation and artwork itself. And after making this project, I was approached by a place called Georgia Museum of Art in Athens, Georgia, to do an exhibit that including this project. But for this installation, I really didn't want to just place the picture on the wall, but wanted to create something more ephemeral that I experienced making this artwork at Masmoka. For the exhibition, it features wall-size photo mural of one of the projected eyes, a photo book documenting the entire series, and a photo sculpture, which is the main component of this installation, positioned at the center of the space. Above the sculpture, the 108-eye slide used in the original projection was suspended, each one casting a small images of the eye 108 times on the bricks arranged below. These bricks evoked both masonry facade of the Masmoka and the idea of the fundamental building blocks of our collective history. The eyes drawn from victims of nuclear weapons serves as a silent witness, reminding viewers that the consequence of the human actions echoes through times, calling for recognition, remembrance, and understanding. The next theme I like to talk about is collaboration. I've done many collaborations to create projects, but there's one specific collaborator I would like to talk about tonight. In 2017, I began to collaborate with my longtime friend and sound artist, Andrew Paul Kuiper. But there's a twist to it. His grandfather was an engineer involved in building the atomic weapon as part of the Manhattan Project, which means his grandfather helped develop the bomb and my grandfather was receiving end. However, we are best friends. He was actually a best man for my wedding. The friendship is possible and that relationship itself gives extra meaning to the artwork. So one of the projects we worked on together is New Light Narrowcast. For this artwork, I created the visual component of the video while Kuiper composed and produced the sound. The visual for the video was created entirely from reprocessed footage of US nuclear testing footage conducted between 1945 to 1992. I began with the declassified nuclear footage seen on the left. Carefully deconstructed each footage into thousands of individual frames. I then transformed these frames into a physical print, exposing them to the tinted sunlight to get this greenish color for the duration of my breath, as I do with any other project. And sometimes I place objects like Godzilla figurine and a US flag and yalla yalla yalla. On the right is one of the print. You can see 71 of the frames that was reconstructed into the video displayed on the left. So 71 frames creates about 3 seconds of the video. I now have a tremendous respect for the animator. It just takes so long. Because of the creation of the video is such a physical and hands-on process, I often choose to display the print used to make the video alongside of the projection. By doing so, it highlights the materiality of the work, allows the viewer to see the both final moving image and the process behind its creation. Let me play the video maybe just for a minute, so you can hear the audio and the video itself. But if you want to see the whole thing, it's available on my website.
Strain to hear the bombers beating the air, the intake of their jets, the intake of our breath, the light, the urgency of our listening, the breath of blast wave across the silent morning, the bright hour of death. These houses stand empty, graves above the sand, to to give our nation perpetual victory over all its enemies. 250 decibels shear away our sins. Can you hear it ricochet off the mountains? This music is eschatology. This music is itself unending. Do you understand yet? May the light have mercy on us. May the wind have mercy on us. Protect our homes. Steal the life from our homes. Steal from all lands. Murder the sky. Scathe the earth. Boil the waters into poisonous steam. The dream of dawn in hell. The obliteration of color is the penalty of power. The dead to come are the penalty of power. The poverty of generations is the penalty of power. A dream of dawn in hell. Do you understand yet or what? With the light of mountains, may the wind have mercy.
I think that's enough for today. But so the next, depending on the time I have left, probably the final theme I'm going to talk about tonight, it's about the performance and the body. In much recent years of making artwork, I have been creating many projects that takes at the public space, either performed in front of the person or people, or documented as part of the documentation, and that became an artwork. One of those projects is titled Burning Away series. This project, visual warning, if you are sensitive to the devastating image, please look away. This project was inspired by the accounts left behind by many survivors of the atomic bombing. In my research, I found numerous stories of the survivors treating their severe burns with honey, cooking oil, and even motor oil because of the basic medicine was so scarce. For context, the heat generated by the bomb reaching roughly 7,700 degrees Fahrenheit, as hot as the surface of the sun, vaporizing people's body at the ground zero, including my own great aunt. Inspired by these stories, I began creating Burning Away by laying out black and white darkroom paper, pre-exposing them to sunlight. And each set of the Burning Away print is made using wide range of the oil, honey, and tree sap. A lot of material was used to heal their wound. I paint the sun-exposed darkroom paper with these oils, forming a simplified silhouette of the human body. Some of the oils are so fluid to the point them to drip, spread, and merge with other oil and honey on the paper. The resulting image is often shaped by many variables, such as the type of the oil used, the amount of time the paper was pre-exposed to the sun, and even the temperature of the space I create the print. I'm really drawn to element of chance, as you can tell already with many other projects. After painting the paper with oils and different material, I process the print in the tray of the photo developer and a fixer. Each sheet goes through about 20 to 50 continuous back and forth immersion. It takes about an hour or two the whole process takes about a whole day. With each passing through of the chemical, small amounts of the oil and honey washes away, gradually forming the unique and unpredictable image. The resulting image depicts a semi-abstracted human figure, a form I intentionally designed to shift depending on the viewer's perspective. From the distance, the piece appears almost figurative, evoking the outline of the body. However, as viewer approached the artwork, the image dissolved into the abstract mass, shaped, and line, resembling a topological map or even the microscopic view of cancer cell. In this way, the work embodies trauma of both micro and a macro level. It reflects the immense destruction nuclear weapon inflicts on people, land, and the planet. While also referencing the invisible long-term effects of radiation exposure, such as embodiment of the cancer and leukemia that manifest within the body. The print on the left was made in the summer, while the heat of the sun caused the oil to loosen up, resulting in much thicker line. Meanwhile, the prints on right was made in winter. The colder temperature made the oil more viscous, producing much finer and thinner line. Here you can see a collection of burning away prints displayed together in one single space. Each piece is unique with its own distinct color and shape, reflecting a variation that emerged naturally through the process of making them, to the point I actually call this process a collaboration with the nature. The work contemplates healing, its necessity, but also its limits. Just as the marks on each print can never be undone, the scars of nuclear trauma cannot be fully erased. Yet, through the act of making, there is a gesture towards remembrance, reconciliation, and possibility, however incomplete, of healing. The last artwork I'll be sharing tonight is one of the most recent artwork as well, which I created 3 weeks ago in New Mexico in collaboration with filmmaker Roger Okamoto and Alex, I'm gonna butcher his name, Zuravel. Who are producing a feature-length documentary about my practice. The project was made on the 80th anniversary of the world's first atomic bombing test, the moment that marked the beginning of the nuclear age. While in New Mexico, I stayed in a town fittingly named Truth or Consequence, located southwest of the Trinity testing site, the location of the world's first atomic bomb detonation featured in film Oppenheimer. The town of Truth or Consequence was located in such a way that allowed the sun, when first peeking over the mountaintop, would align with where the first nuclear firebomb and mushroom cloud would align 80 years ago. And on July 16th, which is the day that they tested the first nuclear testing, to mark this moment, I capture the first light of the day on a long strip, 100 feet long to be precise, black and white darkroom paper, laid out in a straight, uninterrupted line to receive the sun's ray as it rose in the sky. This act created a quiet monument, an archive of light of the 80th anniversary of the birth of the nuclear age, continuing my use of the sunlight as a metaphor for this history. And after processing the print, the paper became almost entirely black scroll. And once it's dried, we took it to the White Sand Missile Range, which is another site deeply tied to the nuclear and military history in the United States. And I relaid it out on the desert. This piece functioned less as a conventional photograph and more as a performative archive, a record of the first rays of the light of the historic morning. It reflects my ongoing effort to use photography as a medium for remembrance, ritual, and witnessing. The nuclear narrative is often seen as distant. Something from the past happens elsewhere. But nuclear weapons remains deeply relevant today, shaping global politics and threatening our shared future. Through my practice, I hope to reveal these connections and create moments for shared remembrance and conversation. Gestures towards healing, even when full healing is seemingly impossible. In coming together as witnessed, we bridge histories and communities long divided by silence, acknowledging that the nuclear story is ongoing and deeply tied to our world today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kei-san. Thank you very much for this very powerful and very deeply touching presentation of your work. And we are so glad to see so many works you have done. But I suspect this is just a small part of your, that's amazing.
You are correct.
So I have so many questions, but I would like to start from the beginning. So why art? I mean, because your topic is very, can be political, and you could have chosen the path to be an activist or researcher. But then you, it's art for you. So how did you, come to,
You ask one of the hardest questions first.
Sorry.
But it's a great question, though. I don't know. Like, there's many way of answering this question. But one, I guess, I can start with how I started as an artist. So I was trained as a photographer, specifically a documentary photographer. I was learning how to do, how to tell a story within a use of photography, and that's something I really is still stuck. Like the idea of the storytelling through the photography has been something ingrained in my brain and body. And within that, even though I try to create something that a lot more abstracted and such, the storytelling is always part of the artwork. But that's one thing. The other thing is, as you were saying, my grandfather was a profound activist. And there's many people who ask me, like, why wouldn't you follow his footstep? I don't know. I always attracted to the creation of art instead of, because as you could have seen on the collaboration between myself and Andrew, there's such a many way to examine one single topic, such as nuclear weapon and bombing of Hiroshima. And I always wanted to see a different perspective, not just my own, but also my grandfather, the downwinders, Andrew's grandfather, Andrew himself. And by examining these different, one single topic in different way, I realized there is no singular narrative that I can be satisfied with. And within that, I always try to explore. And, even though I create so many artwork, I'm still within the journey of trying to understand. And to me, making artwork is one of the way I can comprehend and trying to understand the many way that this can be understood. So to me, this is a process, an ongoing process. And to me, that this art was the only way for me to really go forward for me. And if the artwork can be used as the way to activism or say influence or to make aware of this issue, that's actually a really amazing thing. But my intention always is to try to understand it for myself. And that always kind of like how it's always self-reflective, but by digging inside so much myself, it eventually became outward. By trying to research about my grandfather, it ultimately led to learning about downwinders and I recently, when I went to New Mexico, I met a person who is 93 years old. She witnessed the first nuclear testing, the Trinity testing, and she suffered from cancer. Her daughter is suffering from cancer, and she was telling me that a lot of these issues are ignored. And to me, like the making artwork is one of the way to contribute to preserve the story that was left behind. This is a good segue for me to talk about this project. Also, I place it in the gallery as well. So this is something I did yesterday. So August 6th, the morning of the August 6th, I decided to print 2 prints. One is the eye of the said downwinder person I met in New Mexico. She allowed me to take a picture of her eye. So as the special edition of IFU witnessed, I decided to expose this eye to the light of August 6th, 80th anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing. And along with it, you can't see it on the right side because my body's blocking it. I don't know why I did that, but on the right side, there is an eye of Tanaka-san. Tanaka-san, the friend of my grandfather and the person who gave a speech at Nobel Peace Prize reception. He was a great friend of my grandfather, so I actually got to meet him for the first time, the last time I was in Japan. So he allowed me to take a picture of his eye. So now these two eyes, again, borderless, like global idea of the nuclear trauma embedded within this one space.
Where is it, may I ask?
Oh, so this is actually placed at the Goucher College, which is in Baltimore, Maryland. We had a small gathering of commemorating of the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima. And these pictures were taken by a filmographer, Roger, who took a video of these ones. And these are actually pretty new approach that I'm allowing people to see my process, because usually I do all of the process privately. But I realize the process, what I do inside of the studio or outside of the studio is actually interesting for the people, and I never knew about that. So I was like, when people say like, oh, this is such an interesting process, why don't you show it? I was like, oh, maybe there's a way to show it. So I approached, and people approached me to like take a video and such. And this is just one iteration. That documentation of this scroll actually made the project much more interesting. Because if you go into the gallery and if you see these prints, even though I can describe as much as possible on the written format or talk about it, if I have a video next to it explaining and showcasing the process, it became something a little bit more, maybe. I don't know. But this is a new approach for me.
Very interesting. Thank you for showing us extra slides. This is amazing. So, talking about your technique of camera-less photography, and it's very interesting that you call yourself photographer and you don't use a camera. And then it's in a way, especially this work, it's a photography, but it's all black. Mm-hmm. So I find that there are many kind of duality in your work, and then your idea. You are making invisible visible, and you have absence and presence at the same time, and also even the sun, also a medium you are using, is all about life at the same time, distraction. So this kind of tension in your work is very interesting. Is this something that you are intentionally involving, or it's just a kind of result?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. Again, there's so many different ways I can answer. So if I kind of off topic, let me know. I'm a rebel when it comes to like a lot of things, and rebel in a way that I was trained as a photographer, but I started realizing and felt like the camera was not what I was attracted to photography. Even though today, everyone has a camera, cell phone, taking the pictures, I was overwhelmed by it. Like I felt if everything is already photographed, what can I contribute to it? And when I started making work that didn't involve the object or camera, it was such a freeing moment that I just felt right about it. And it was kind of hard because at the beginning, a photography field, like the photo gallery and a photo curator, had a hard time showing my artwork, or like I was tend to be like brushed aside, like, oh, he's a fluke of like some experimental photographer, and I felt really discouraged first time. And I actually, honestly, like for some point, I was like, I'm not gonna call myself photographer anymore, and I gonna call myself a visual artist, because only place I was showing was a regular art gallery, and I felt like more than a photographer a lots of time. But I call it a curse and blessing. I always, even though I try to create something non-photographic prints, like it always, the name of the talk tonight, I didn't get to talk about this. This is a piece that me and Andrew created, 108 6x6x6 cube, lined in one single line in outside of the art yard, which is the gallery in New Jersey. But when I created it, I couldn't help but place a film inside of the cube. And in this film, I took pictures, and content of the film, that what's inside of the film is only I know what's in it. And only way for you or any of the people to know what's in it is actually by breaking the cube and develop the film. No one have done it yet. And now it sits in the backyard, so only way is to actually sneak into the backyard. But
So what are they? I mean, what
Oh,
is in
you.
no?
I'm not gonna tell you.
Okay, sorry.
I'm gonna give you a sledgehammer. Then you can find out. But when I created this piece, which was all about preserving these artifact I had of my grandfather, that this is a gas mask from Ukraine, filling them into the oil that I was using to create Burning Away print. But ultimately, after I think about it, this is photography because it's preserving, containing the memory. So it's always like my framework always goes back to the idea of the photography. So this is a curse and blessing of the photography. I can't think outside of it, even though like I'm not using the camera. So it's kind of like always a push and pull dance I play with the photography that it tried to jab me with the shiv, and I'm trying to dodge it and try to shiv it back. So it's like it really is an interesting thing, and I actually enjoy it. How much can I push photography?
That's great. It's very interesting idea that conserving memory is photography. That's very.
It's one way to think about it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thank you so much. Another point, again, I have so many points, but then, so global aspects of nuclear weapon and memories and then suffering of this thing is one of the things that you are working on, global. So as a Japanese American, I mean, you were born in Japan, right? So, and working in US and working on global aspects of nuclear weapon. Is there any do you find it like a advantage, or do you find some kind of not really tension, but how do you approach that global aspect?
Geography plays a lot. Location, the place really inspires me to create. As you could see in the Masmoka project, the New Mexico project. But I really do think, so I left my country when I was 15. I actually moved to New Zealand for my high school, and I fall in love with nature and started picking up photography, and that's how I found to love photography. And then realized, I want to pursue photography career. So I decided to apply some of the college in the United States, even though I never been to America at that point. One of the college who took me was Rochester Institute of Technology, actually not too far away from here. So I very much understand the snow and the coldness of the Canada and Rochester. I understand it. I don't miss that part. But what was the question again?
So the global aspect.
Yes,
of,
global
your
aspect.
work.
Yes. So having the Japanese background, lived in New Zealand, and actually, while I was in New Zealand, actually, I lived in the shared house for a little bit, where about 6 to 7 people who come to the country to learn language or trying to learn culture for like a week to a month. So I actually met about 60 people for 2 years span. And by doing so, I developed a sense of the global citizen. This idea of seeing the one single aspect from different angle and a different perspective. And after living in the United States, especially in Baltimore, really opened my eye to see the stuff in really different way. And especially within so first year I was in Baltimore, the Baltimore uprising after the murder of the Freddie Gray happened. And after that, I was talking to different people, and seeing all of these things really inspired or kind of pushed me to create art that could have a political meaning. And that's something that, not just that, but it's kind of an accumulation of all of these things turns into who I am, I guess. So yeah, I don't know if it really answered it, but.
So being a Japanese is not very important for you?
I mean, Japanese, I don't know. But my grandfather definitely does. And, I think it's a thing. Like, I probably wouldn't have made any of the work of the nuclear issue if that wasn't part of my heritage or lineage. It just happened to be something that, again, like a lot of my project is pointing the lens of the camera, not outward, but inward. And by doing so, I realized the nuclear heritage is something that makes a lot of who I am. And by learning that and living in America, which is, a lot of discussion about rearming and, like modernization of the nuclear weapon, a lot of bills passing, all of these things. And unfortunate reality is this nuclear issue in my art is more relevant than ever, which is certainly not my grandfather wanted. So it is, so, we have to see it from a little bit far perspective, the global perspective, to have a compassion and empathy, I think. I don't know.
No, I totally hear your sentiment, being Japanese, living outside Japan. So yes. So I have one last question, and then I will open the question to the floor, which is, you have been working artwork for, I don't know how many years, like more than 15 years or something, or even more?
As an artist?
Yes.
Well, I mean, when do you start being an artist, right?
No, I mean, many years. So
right.
how do you see the evolution of your work from the start to here, and then how do you see your future? I mean, where are you going?
So yeah, no, that's a great point. As you saw, like today's topic, since that thematically it was a very affirmatively talked about nuclear weapon, and it's actually still is my main subject, even though within that context I sometimes incorporate some of the climate change aspect of it. Sometimes I talk about the Japanese internment camp, which is the Japanese people who were imprisoned in United States during World War II, and I sometimes talk about a race and such, and a lot of these things, but I always go back to the nuclear weapon. It's not just sometimes it's not the main part of the subject, but more passively present in the background. And I think that's just kind of like a same for photography. It's a blessing and a curse. I can never get away because my framework and how I think at this moment is still very much embedded within the idea of the who I am and the third generation AVM survivors. So that within that, which is funny because I make work about nuclear weapons so many times, but every single one of the project, you might agree, you might disagree, but its execution is different, and I always find a new approach to approach this matter. And I didn't include. Do I have it here? I might have it here. Not recently, as 3 years ago. Sorry about the slides. It just takes time. This is actually happening in Washington, D.C. right now. But here I was using, so the picture in front of it, the projection on the front is actually a first picture of the sun taken by French scientists in 1845, 100 years prior to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Trinity testing. And on juxtaposed to both sides, it has a separate poetry, but each one has a different color. So as it goes through, it creates a different, but it collectively creates the poetry. And that is something, I don't explicitly say this is a nuclear matter, but this is about how sun has been part of our human history. So I talk about, in the poetry, it talk about Shintoism with the sun, Mayan religion, Egyptian Ra. It really fascinates me, the idea of the sun. So within that, it's much more loose, poetic, but also it has an undertone of the nuclear weapon, because that's who I am.
So you see your future like a ongoing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think this is a lifelong pursuit, I think, or until we decide to abolish all the nuclear weapon. This is a project a theme I forever probably going to pursue in one way or other.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. So now I'm open to the floor. So if you have any question to Kei, I'm sure you have many. So there are mics. So, yeah, please.
Thank you so much for your talk. Does living in Baltimore give you a unique perspective? It certainly does for the filmmaker John Waters.
Hello.
Definitely. God, Hairspray is one thing, the Pink Flamingo, my childhood. And actually, I've seen him. I used to work at the photo lab, and sometimes he just pops in and drops some film. He is a character. But, Baltimore is surprisingly really quirky place that allows a lot of experimentation happens. A lot of, among with myself and a young artist, they are not shy away with following the trend, but rather they kind of follow. It's a space that they are allowed to follow their passion and whatever wacky thing we create. And yeah, the aspect I love Baltimore. I think she had it first. Yeah.
40 years ago, yesterday morning, on the 40th anniversary, I walked out my front door in the morning, very early. There were chalk outlines all over the sidewalk. They were gone by the 9th.
Wow.
It was truly heartrending and really brought home the reality of all those human people who disappeared.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. It's a scary thing that so a lot of one of the phenomenon that happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki was people who were near ground zero. Only thing that was left behind was shadow or outline of the body, and that inspires me many of the project, especially within the one of the first project I showcased on the slide, the body print. That was one of the early work I did, and that was definitely inspired by the phenomenon of the. And if you go to Hiroshima Peace Museum, you can actually go to the one of the exhibit that has the cutout, or they took out the floor of the one of the building where you can vaguely tell a person, the shadow of the person sitting, engraved forever on the stone. And many extent, bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is a really a photographic phenomenon. So meaning of there's Mizutani Ripet. He is author of the cinema and how Japanese cinema is affected by a nuclear weapon like a Godzilla, and he said it turned the city into a camera, meaning if you deconstruct photography in this about light and shadow, if a bomb was exploded on the sky and the only thing it left is a rubble and the shadow, it's the most devastating camera ever created on this earth. And it's a really poetic way, but I was really inspired, influenced by his writing. And within that, I really think the photography to me is one of the only honest way to portray the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or like the issue of the nuclear weapon. But yeah, no, thank you for sharing the story. Really appreciate that.
Thank you very much for your talk today. Very enjoyable, thank you. Are you considering, or have you already considered the use of new technologies to incorporate into your art, such as AI images, for example, or AI moving images?
I still trying to figure out how I can have a conversation with the media of AI, meaning I haven't quite fully understand the AI's placement in the world. And right now, it feels like the use of the AI to create artwork feels environmentally very harmful. And it is one of these things that, 3 Mile Island is bought by, I think it's Google, Microsoft, I don't remember, but to power the AI, to generate the power to fuel AI. And within that, I can think of the way to use AI to criticize that, not by using AI, but rather how AI is fueling the use of the nuclear. But also the other thing I really wanted to say is, the world has been sustained by, not sustained, but there's a such thing as a MAD, mutual assured destruction. And there's a big talk within the AI developer that let's have AI to make decision for the deterrence. So it's gonna be 100% gonna retaliate. No human decision involved. AI retaliate and attack decide the nuclear attack, and that is scary to me. There's a countless time in the past that nuclear devastation was avoided because of the human decision. And within that, I think if I ever make work about AI, I think I'm gonna be place of criticism rather than use of the AI to create something. But that's something that new technology is something I always think about trying to incorporate, but I always attracted to physicalness, like a slide projector. I could have made it with regular projector, but I was so attracted to the physicality of the slide projector. A curator hates it because she has to replace the light bulb every single week. But I supplied all of the light bulbs. So maybe eventually I shift to some more newer technology, but right now I'm really very much attracted to tangible things. But thank you for the question.
Hi. So I have a question. So my family recently did visit the Hiroshima Peace Museum. And I know that some of the narratives are about the survivors where after they were exposed, there was this sense of dread for when that radiation phenomenon where the body might just fall victim within, and quick death comes for them like a week or so. So I know your a lot of your exhibits tries to capture the ephemeral feeling. Have you thought about somehow capturing that more sense of dread that folks succumb to, to cancer or other effects later on, that part of the experience?
Absolutely. So a lots of work I do, even though what you're seeing right now is a still image of installation based, but lots of the time I don't just create a print that goes on the wall. I usually create the space, right? And one of the reason I do it is it can allow to have time element. So when you enter the space, experiencing how the light interact with the prints, and usually the audio made by Andrew Paul Kuiper. He tend to one of the video was a little bit more aggressive part of the audio, but usually what he does is a drone music, which is he sustains a one single note, and it's really what is the word for it? Not meditative in a way, but it's really heavy rumble, dreadful sound to be said. And I always think the idea of creating a memorial when I create a space, installation-based artwork. And by what I mean is, it is the place that people may not know what is it about, but entering it, they feel some kind of, whenever you go to a memorial, even though you don't know what it is about, you kind of feel a sense of something in your heart, right? Like this heaviness of feeling, the atmosphere. And that's something I try to create within my installation. Even though it may not be exactly what you are asking for, but it is the feeling that it's a journey that they have to go through in the space in order to experience it. It's not something that the artwork exists on the wall and there's a separation between the artwork and yourself. You physically enters, and lots of time I play with the light where the light of the artwork hits you. Thus, you became part of this narrative of the nuclear weapon. So like that, I think passively a lot of these things about, and that's why I keep interested in the idea of the installation art. So back to that question though, like, do I call myself a photographer? I'm a photographer the photographer-based artist, photography-based artist.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah.
Thank you very much for your very rich presentation. It was really intellectually creative and also conceptually intellectual and creative and visually compelling. I have two questions. Does this mic work?
No, I hear you just fine.
Okay, thank you. So I was writing, I wrote my dissertation on Korean contemporary artists' work, especially socially engaged art. And my question of the project was how to present suffering of others into visual art without presenting their suffering into visual spectacle. And as I see your work, I think you are thinking really deeply how not to present the bodies of the victims. I think you could have gone in easier way, like directly showing the photo, like lots of photographic images of the victims and those visceral images, but you seem to have intentionally avoided that kind of representation. So I hope to hear more about your ethical concerns behind it. And my second question is your use of healing. So you mentioned healing in your two projects at the end of your presentation, and you also mentioned seemingly impossible healing. So can you mention more about how, like, what kind of healing can art generate? Is it possible? If so, is it for whom?
Absolutely. For the first question, there's so many layers to how I can answer it. But one of the things I want to talk about is myself. I didn't witness the bombing of Hiroshima. I'm only can imagine what my grandfather went through and what he experienced, and all of the radiation hit his skin might have passed on to me, but myself didn't witness the bomb. So what I am doing is reimagining all of these things, and by imagining these things, I think I tend to attracted to the abstraction of things because that's how I visualize inside of my brain. But on the other side, other part is, I think, as you were saying, that there's a lots of archive that exist that showcase the devastation of the nuclear weapon or any trauma, and that I don't think you can make stronger image than that. But I think there's a way that there's a place that if you display these kind of trauma in front of the people, especially now time that where everyone is so desensitized with these traumatic image, there's a sense of disconnection between the image and yourself. And I think there's the art, and especially the abstraction of the art, where people can enter it with or without the knowledge of what is it about. And to me, that is really important, that art is uniquely positioned instead of, like, say, activism or like historic archive and such. And within that, I try to make a balance, and that balance is I still like some of the project, like I've Witnessed, is more archive heavy. Some of the other project is more poetry, but I'm still trying to find a balance. And every single project is trying to figure out how much of the representation, how much of my narrative, how much of the other narrative, but how much of that I'm allowed to talk about. And if I do want to talk about, I want to make it into more of like a conversation. I actually want to know about it, not just the person who abused the other's pain. And that's something like still I'm trying to figure out the ethical way of doing so. And within that, the healing is the other thing that I think, my grandfather became, after witnessing of the bomb, he used to be a Buddhist. He couldn't believe in a God. He was atheist throughout until he passed. And it's such a strong thing that he couldn't believe that there's such thing that could done to this world. And that's something that it really plays some kind of impression in my childhood. And this idea of, like, even though he tried so much and did so much to himself and other Avon victims who were suffering, and he established a healthcare from Japan and the acknowledgement and all that thing. But in the end, my great uncle, who I was just back up a little bit. So this is my great uncle who was brother of my grandfather, and he is one of the person I always meet whenever I go to Japan to hear about his experience of Hiroshima, because he is one of the last remaining family that exist. And one day he said, yeah, but even though, like, there's so many things people have done, there's no healing from this, because the scar and the trauma was already done. But my question is, how do we go? How do we step forward from there? And now a lot of these story of the trauma is disappearing. People are forgetting. A lot of these people, Tanaka-san, my great uncle who was telling me these things passed this year. A lot of these first-hand stories disappearing. And the way to archive or way to honor and, in a way, the healing for the future generation is to continue this discussion, continue this talk, continue this story before it gets forgotten. So I'm just going all over the place, aren't I? But yeah. If there's any ounce of like a response that you are looking for in this conversation, I apologize. I'm like, my brain is getting fried right now. But yeah, thank you so much for the question.
Yeah. Okay, one last question, maybe. The time is up. Okay, yes, please.
Hi, thanks a lot for sharing your process and the end results of so many endeavors that you've taken to show the stories of the bombings. I wanted to ask that in this process, like you've mentioned, since you've heard stories from your family and you've gone through archives and you've made so much effort of understanding the history of what exactly happened, and it's a lot for one person to read and go through and just kind of accumulate into one project. What is your process of going through the research and conceptualizing one end result of what you want to portray, and how do you differentiate how do you stop how do you ensure you're not getting overwhelmed with all that you're getting exposed to, because it's a lot.
Absolutely.
As I guess.
And I think
thanks a lot.
This can be a connection to responding additionally to what you were saying earlier, is all of the project I make is kind of like all of the project you see is more like a byproduct of me going through the healing for myself. My healing meaning of I think healing starts with understanding for myself, understanding of others, and trying to see what perspective they and I could have, and my grandfather had, my downwinder had. And by doing these things, I start finding these dots all across the time, the world, the places. And my practice is by connecting these threads into a single line to see where we're standing. All extension of all of these things, this is where we're standing. And even though these are already predetermined line, where we're going is still unknown. And that's the part that there's a possibility of the future, is why I'm keep going to make this artwork. Because it's not about the past, but rather learning from the past to talk about and contemplate where we stand right now to actually go from here to the better future. That human decency is ultimately what I hope for. And because of that spirit, I hold on the hope for the humanity, and that's why I keep going. So yeah, that's kind of how. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Kei-san, for sharing your wonderful, powerful, and moving works. And thanks, Kiko, for your guiding through this conversation and questions. And thanks for those who are participating in the question, and particularly to all of you for spending your evening with us. I hope that you enjoy your time with us tonight. And again, thanks very much, and I hope I'll see you soon in the future program. Thank you. Good evening.